Welcome to the Live Wildly podcast, a space where we explore how to live our wildest expressions while nourishing our hearts. Here, we cover all things motherhood, spirituality, health, wellness, and more. I'm your host, Olivia Ashley, a mama, intuitive, and seeker of a joyful, inspired life. Let's dare to live wildly. Welcome back to another episode and another day. This is Olivia Ashley here, and today starts us off with what will become an ongoing conversation with my dear friend, coach, astrologer, educator, Abbie Massey. And really what this is Abbie came to me with this great idea of wanting to explore astrology from the lens of the sun. So I think we hear a lot about moon cycles and other astrological things or monthly updates. And while this is a monthly cadence because the sun cycle is around 28 days, I've been really having the pull to investigate the sun more and look at the sun and what's going on with it, how it's affecting us. And Abbie brings such a wealth of knowledge in astrology. It amazes me when I always listen to her speak because I just can't seem to remember everything that she can. I mean, yes, she's trained, but I really do have a love for astrology. I find it so poignant, supportive, interesting. I just remember being a child looking up at the stars and the planets and just being in awe of everything that's out there. And so I was like, okay, this sounds like this is good timing. You know, I'm always open and wondering about what else can I bring on this podcast? What conversations can we have? And I'm not sure if this will be one that's consistently put out on the schedule that I currently have, which is every other week, a new episode comes out on Wednesday. It might end up being a bonus episode some months. It just will depend. So flow with me. I know I've had a few other series with Angela Husney and Energy. And if you liked those first two episodes, note that Angela will be coming on very soon to finish up that series with the third and final episode there. That's a great one. I think it's a really supportive, overarching episode around energy. And then I've also had a dear friend, Liz Neihart, come on, just as she is so similar to me as a mother, as a worker, as just so spiritually minded and navigating a lot. And her and I did a couple episodes back fall and winter, and then we haven't really connected. We have it all planned of what we're going to talk about, but as life goes, sometimes things just don't work on the timeline you think they're going to. So I never mean to start and stop things. I just really flow in my life. So I hope that that's how that feels for you. But I definitely would love to hear if that's not the case, because I want this to be supportive for everyone. But just know that, you know, people and friends and others pop in, leave, and then come back. And I trust the timing of a lot of this, that wherever we're at, and if there needs to be space, it's meaningful. And so Abbie and I, we live very close to one another, and she's one of my dearest friends. And so it's a bit easier for her and I to get together and be consistent. And she's really driven by astrology and this, and I'm really driven and energetically and intuitively to say, there's something here. And I'm not quite sure exactly where this will lead us. We probably will mix up our flow of like what to expect of what we talk about. And today's just that first start. So like I said, Abbie and I are going to start looking at where the sun is in the sky, as in astrologically, specifically the zodiac cycle. So we just began our new cycle. So there's 12 signs that starts with Aries, ends in Pisces. And so back in, I want to say March, around the spring equinox, we moved into Aries season, which began this new astrological cycle. The sun just feels prominent and important, that there's a lot of messages, support, clarity, vitality, right? Like the sun is what gives us life. There's so much beauty there. And yet I don't often hear too much about it, right? I know like your sun sign and that, but I'm really curious and feeling there is much more here. And so I'm trusting where this is going to lead us. And Abbie and I start off reminiscing back to Pisces season, how we ended that last zodiac cycle, starting with then Aries season, what that felt like. And Abbie is going to really be sharing from the astrological standpoint. She's very technical. Sometimes it's almost too technical, but I hope that it makes sense and can ground you, especially if you're someone who wants data and dates and, okay, here's what this planet is doing. I think it's helpful. I am starting to have to visualize like these literal planets in my head moving because I get ungrounded with just data. I learn visually. So try to maybe paint a picture in your head as we're talking or look at a calendar to just plant yourself with where we're at. And then I layer on my intuitive gifts and energy work. So I, in preparation for this, went in and what I will do for future episodes too is go into the Akashic records, note that we're focusing right on the sun in this sign, and then see what comes forward. And I'm pretty broad. I'm intentionally asking for guidance for this group, but also collectively, what do we need to know? Looking around from like, what are the influences? And again, I don't have an astrological background. I don't fully understand most of these signs. But what was so fun was when Abbie put her notes together with mine and we started this conversation, there was a lot of threads that were so similar and that we were able to pull and go, oh, okay, this is why this came forward and kind of how this relates to what we can think and see in that way. And so there's just this weaving that happens in this conversation between Abbie and myself and really in hopes that this helps support you. So we are constantly changing, constantly evolving. We are affected, I believe, by the astrological placements of these planets and these signs and where we are on Earth in our solar system, right? Like it goes to our energetic fields. We are energy, and all of this is just this big, beautiful quantum energetic soup is how I see this. And so we're showing up in hopes to support you, that you might be able to glean some information of what you're moving through, maybe prepare for what's coming up, just how can you support yourself a little bit. I think having knowledge and insight is helpful, but I also, from the other side of the coin, want to say that we are doing our best to share what our truth is and what we are feeling in this moment, but you might have a very different truth and reality than what we're feeling. So take everything with a grain of salt, and also don't hold so hard to this stuff that you don't allow for flow or just surrendering and seeing what happens. Don't worry. Like if anything makes you feel worried, I don't think anything we brought up should have you worried, but I really want you to relax into your life, relax into the beauty of this world and how the magic unfolds. And this is just a guidepost for you to kind of get your bearings, kind of get a higher understanding, and then help you move through the times. So like I said, right now, this will be kind of a monthly cadence that Abbie and I will shoot for, and we might put a couple signs together. It just depends on how life goes. So I also want to just give the caveat of this is fluid. I'm, again, flowing with this, and just we will do our best to be accountable and thorough and supportive of you all if you really do enjoy this series, I guess, this time that Abbie and I make together to follow the sun and learn a bit more about what's in store for us astrologically and energetically, intuitively. And so in this episode, like I said, we start with Pisces and Aries, and then we move into preparing for Taurus energy. So the sun moves into Taurus April 19th through May 20th, 2024. And I want to give the caveat that as when I talked about it, this specific Taurus season, I said it as if it's already happening, because in my brain it was happening because we're talking about it and I'm in the energy. And so sorry about that. I don't mean to cause any confusion, but just note that we're really close. That's 10 days away from us as I'm recording this. It's the 9th today. This will come out tomorrow on the 10th. And so just notice that. And then the other piece that I I misspoke on was I talked about how CERN was being started on the eclipse again. And I said it's the Hadron Collider and it is the Hadron Collider. So I was close, but words seem to fail me sometimes. I will be completely honest that, again, I think visually. And so I see things in my head and then I have to try to grasp the words that I'm looking for. So I am not perfect by any means. I will never be perfect. So thank you for bearing with me as I just misstated a few things. So I think that's about it. I just wanted to give that clarity before you start the episode, because if you're like me, you might catch that and go, wait, what is she talking about? So here's that sidebar note for you. But I think this is a great one. I think this, as always, right? I think if you don't think that about what you're creating, then something's a little awry there. But truly, I am really excited for this energy and for this time and to learn more and be guided from the sun's perspective and see what comes forward. There was a lot of energy around that we're taking baby steps, right? Like it's time to just slow down, relax into yourselves, connect with the elements, invite water. It's a very fiery time. There's a lot of activation and asking for integration. And sometimes we get in this fiery energy and we're like, we just want to push and do. And let's be thoughtful. That was the other side of, can we be thoughtful? Can we prepare? Can we integrate and really understand what we're moving through in preparation for this leap, the leap of faith, that big next step? And it all really feels around big soul missions. Like clarity is coming in this time period, and not everything, right? It's not going to solve everything, but we're going to get that next nugget. I think the majority of us, of maybe we thought we were going to go somewhere these last years or decades, and it was all purposeful, right? We can look at our life and go, wow, we really learned a lot. And I think it's important that you step away from feeling that you're not on track with your timeline. Trust the timing of your life and where you're at, and allow everything to unfold in the pace that it is, and note that it is for you. That was the really big message. And there's a lot of new energy, new people, new opportunities, new things coming into your life, specifically because we are changing. So we can't have the same life, the same people, the same things. If we want to be something different, someone different, step into a new phase of our life, things around us have to just change to reflect that piece of what we are and what we're becoming. So just be aware, like invite that. That's exciting. It feels supportive. It feels like, yes, we need this for what we're moving in towards. And note that that also brings some decay and some releasing of things that no longer serve us, people that no longer serve us, hobbies, interests, jobs, relationships. There's a lot of shifting and changing in this time period. So without much further ado, I will leave you there and I will let us jump into this episode with Abbie and myself. And I just really hope that you enjoyed as much as we enjoyed having this conversation and you get whatever you need from it. So as always, if you enjoyed the episode, please share with a friend, share with any family members, and hit subscribe. And I'd love to see a rate and review if you would like to. That just warms my heart when I see all of your messages and how this podcast is affecting you so far. So thank you all so much. So much love to you in this almost Taurus season and new astrological year. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Live Wildly. Today we have something a little different because I am here with my friend and awesome astrologer, Abbie Massey.
Hello.
And we are about to start to explore the energy, the stars, and how we are feeling through this time and space. Specifically, Abbie's going to use her astrological insights and intuitive feelings to share what we are moving through. And even more cool is we are going to focus from the perspective of the sun, and we will totally share and explore more topics, right? The moons and the other planets. But this is something that we've both been kind of feeling the nudge to do, and we wanted to bring us together. And on top of that, I will use my gifts as an intuitive, as a channel, and be channeling information for the current month of the energy that we're moving through, and also relating just what's coming up. As you know, if you're listening, this is kind of what I do through most of my episodes, even if I don't do it very specifically, but intentionally. We are tapping in and just having fun. Abbie and I always get together and have these types of conversations. So it's not very unusual. And we thought, if we're feeling like this and we use these tools and we always feel better when we step away from each other, why don't we start to record ourselves doing it and put some effort and thought behind it? So I hope you enjoy. I hope you can resonate or glean insight or just feel supported, like you're in the room with us having a nice fun chat. Maybe you have a nice drink and just settle in, listen in, and enjoy. And so to start, I want to share more about our intention with it. So, like I said, this is pretty commonplace for Abbie and I, and we want to understand more about the sun. So, Abbie, why don't we start there we don't often hear about it. I think in our circles, the moon has become very cherished, very understood. As women, we are deeply connected. Our cycles sync. We feel a lot of insight, illumination, right? We can all understand and feel that. And yet, the sun is such an important piece. And to me, what I've seen, it often is connected to the ego. And sometimes I think we can feel that's bad or not something like we want to always step into, or maybe we even know ourselves. Like we know what that is for us. So let's look at the other planets and the other pieces more deeply. At least for me, that's been a little bit of my experience. And I started having the thought of, moons have cycles, and people have done such a great job of breaking it down, but we don't often hear that about the sun. And I am just so curious, like how long the cycle is, and really the energy, because to me it's been so full of vitality, and it's beckoning me to listen and connect and be outside. And I think there's been this villainization of the sun, not fully, but from the media and from other people, that climate change, all that. And that's a whole different perspective. But I'm seeing these threads of the sun. It's like we've turned our back energetically to the sun. We're a little fearful. We don't really know if we want to understand it. What is it causing us? What's the attributions of it? And I am really feeling that that isn't truth in me, and that there's a lot to glean and learn. And I'm really excited to hear Abbie's perspective because, like I said, I've channeled some information, gotten insight through the Akashic records and from our guides for this space in our collective of what we're moving through or what this energy kind of is going to bring to. So I don't know much about the sun. I will be completely honest, right? I know the basics. And tell me more, Abbie, from your perspective.
So from an astrological perspective, the sun is obviously the center of the solar system, so it is so important. It's what everything is orbiting around. So without the sun, there would be no life in our universe. And the sun in astrology is represented as our gifts, like what we came into the world with a natural inclination towards, what we're just naturally good at and we enjoy, and that what brings us joy. It's that light inside of us. And on a more astronomical level, the sun is entering a new phase in the life cycle of suns, and it's been very active. So it's been releasing a lot of solar energy, and that solar energy impacts the earth. There's been giant solar flares, and they're coming into our atmosphere, into our magnetic field. And I think sometimes, people talk about that in a way of like, oh, that could interrupt technology, the internet, those sorts of things. But at the same time, we're getting new information and energy from the sun, and that sun is shifting us. And all the energy that's coming in, I recently heard that the sun is causing the earth to orbit more quickly, like very minimally, like 1 second in a year. But still, I mean, that's so interesting and on a real physical level, but then how does that impact us and raise our vibration? And so the sun is that life giver, and some of the um, characteristics that we associate with the sun in astrology is kings or rulers, because without the sun it's viewed as the ruler of the solar system, but the sun is shining light onto all the other planets and the moon, and that light is being bounced around. And so it's so important. The sun never goes retrograde. If you think of all the planets, only the sun and the moon don't ever retrograde because they continually go through the signs. So that's why it's a really nice way to talk about the astrology, because the sun is always in a sign for about 30 days. So this month we're focusing on Taurus energy, and the sun will be in Taurus from April 19th to May 20th, and that's consistent that then it will be in the next sign for about the same amount of time, and it just moves around that zodiac wheel. It would have been good to have this idea a month earlier and start in Aries, because that is the start of the astrological new year and of the astrological wheel, but we'll get through all 12 and we'll do that one, and we'll briefly talk about that here too, but how it continually moves forward, and it really is just that consistent day after day. As the sun moves through the different signs, it focuses on different ways of expressing, and that's why with astrology everybody knows their sun sign, and that sun sign can tell us what kind of topics do interest us or are easy for us, those sorts of things. So
yeah, that makes sense. So maybe while we're on the topic, I want to talk about some of the first energy that I was feeling when I was channeling this information, which was totally relevant to the sun. Now that I am rereading and connecting these dots of, I was very open of just what needs to come through. But the big message was noticing this internal flame within ourselves, within our heart space, that spark of vitality. We're being asked to let that become our friend, that we've hidden it deep in the shadows of ourselves, especially as we move through this winter. And it feels even back to pandemic times that this heavy shadow came forward, and we all put this cage around our hearts and to keep us from being harmed. It was a defense mechanism, and it's allowing us to feel good and be safe, but it's dampened our spirits, it's dampened ourselves. And if you felt anything like I did, even the last couple months, it's been really a struggle of feeling that light, feeling that vitality, and then also wanting to shut it down or again protect ourselves. And so right now we are being asked to begin to work with it. Essentially, there's this sense of an invitation of it's time. You could remove this cage if you would like to. And so letting yourself decide, like, does that feel good? Am I ready? I feel like you will know that at this point of that dance. And maybe it's going to take a little bit more time and tending to our hearts, but the sun can come forward to help really empower you, to illuminate these shadows. I feel like it's all connected on various levels within ourselves, like physically and emotionally, and that if we can allow ourselves to start to just like breathe again, there's a sense that we have been retaining our breath, retaining our inner spark, our inner light in this, just waiting, right? We've all been kind of waiting on edge. What's about to happen? Is something coming? Because that was rightfully so how we were feeling. And yet we're finally hitting this time, even though there was still a lot of chaos and uncertainty and hardship. The energy and our guides and the just support of where we're at in this time and in our lives, it feels like we are at this fated moment that a lot of us have. It's like we came into our bodies at the time we did. We moved through the pieces we did too. And it's not to say that like, okay, we're at the end and boom, like we're done, right? We did our job. Life's gravy. It's this, you've done everything with so much purpose, and there's a sense of trusting that timing, and we know we can overcome any obstacles, and we know that spirit has our back at this point. And so can we embrace this kind of in between where we just went through a lot of heavy stuff? In the last 150 years was a lot of heavy stuff too, right? There's beauty, there's creation, there's innovation, but it's a time to start to resettle and to grasp that life again. Like, what makes you come alive? What makes you spark that internal flame? And the sun is your ally, the sun is your friend. And that has been such a big key for me, I would say, to start to believe in that. And so maybe this doesn't feel right, or maybe you're like, yeah, I'm here with you. Just notice where you're at in this dance and what this even brings, because maybe this is the first seed of your willingness to reopen. And it's not to say we're not doing what we should be, right? Like, we are all existing, doing incredible things and being who we are, and that is enough, and we are whole. But there's been this weighted blanket on all of us, this shadow, this heaviness, this cage around our hearts that was purposefully placed, and we're all collectively being invited to release that at this moment.
I love that, Olivia. And the sun literally is our internal flame, that spark of vitality. That's another one of the words that gets associated with the sun, is literally vitality, or how much energy we have. And I absolutely agree with, we have been in fight or flight. We have to put a cage around our heart for many reasons. And for me, like, I noticing, like, all of history, we've been in survival mode of what do we need to do, and we're now ready. This is the opportunity, kind of like the sun is going into a new phase and putting out new energy. We are going into a new phase, and in this phase it is safe to be ourselves. And a lot of what has come up with the eclipses, which we'll talk a bit about, is getting in touch with your authenticity, and that is the sun in our astrology charts too. And how can we be our authentic selves and have that be safe? And so I think that fits so well.
Yes. Okay. I'm really excited for this. I'm feeling so, just like, there's so much that wants to be shared, I think is what I sense. And there's so many of us grasping for support. And so I hope that this feels as good as it feels right now as we're looking at this information. So let's start with going back a little to the start of this new zodiac cycle with that 12 months that you were sharing. And so can you start to expand on that? Throw us back for a novice. If we know nothing, what do we need to know, and plant us where we started?
Okay, so if I want to go back to Pisces, and Pisces is actually the last sign of the zodiac. So Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, and so there's 12 signs, and the sun goes around those signs in a year. And the spring equinox is the first day of Aries, and for astrologists, that is the astrological new year, because Aries is a fire sign. It's a cardinal fire sign. So cardinal starting things, fire is just doing ideas, and so it's just this really like a baby, like, let's get out and experience life. Let's just try everything, not really think about it necessarily, but just follow what feels right. And then you go around the whole year, and Pisces is that last sign, and Pisces is a sign of letting go, bringing things to a close. You know, our subconscious, more our intuition. It's a water sign. It's a mutable water sign. So just being able to be adaptable and be in touch with our intuition. So I want to start with Pisces, because I feel like, you know, it's a big contrast going from Pisces to Aries that we do every year. And for Pisces season, it was like a very intense month for me. And it just, for me, it brought up a lot of karma. And I know it was bringing that up for other people as well. But like you were saying, like, we're ready to release a lot of those old patterns, or like behavioral patterns, or thought patterns, or emotional patterns.
She's releasing with us.
Yes. Olivia's puppy. It was sneezing. And so we were releasing karma. And as we were releasing that old version of us, or the patterns we've had for, you know, all of our lives up until now, you could feel like you were sitting in this like void of, I'm not that old person, but I don't know who I am, how I am going forward. So letting go of our past versions of ourselves and not quite knowing what new version's coming next. And I know we've had that conversation, Olivia, where I was like, oh my gosh, things that I thought I had moved through are coming back up for me, and oh, I have to deal with them again. this is a lot to move through. And then you kind of shared that you kind of felt like you were sitting in a void.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I think exactly from the start of the year, like the true new year, January 1st, to really through the whole Pisces season, the word it's like we're being stripped apart to reconfigure ourselves for the purpose of this potential that we're stepping into. And another word I keep getting is preparation. These words, preparation, potential, but it came with such a cost. And when I was reflecting about those first couple months in that Pisces season, it was this, and even into Aries, this stripping, and that nearly broke me. It was wild. I don't know the last time I've had such a deep reckoning in myself, and it's so hard to describe. And it's like, and life goes on. I think that was also what I was grasping is I have things I'm doing, I have things I'm accountable to. The day in, day out doesn't stop, and yet this internal wave was just crashing over me. And it was so beautiful too. The insights, the realizations, the understandings, the curiosity that was stoked because of this is unfounded. But that is where I feel like a lot of us I've seen are kind of in this rest, relax, try to reset side. I think there was one of two coins or a little bit of both for some people. And so I'm curious too, like if saying back to that void, it's like I see us right now, we're putting our legs through this void. We're moving through this threshold and we're not quite sure still. And the time on that feels like we still have some more time until we really are illuminated to what we're going towards. And yet it's this depth and understanding, this darkness, that shadow that is so potent if we allow it to be. And that's what Pisces season and Aries season even started. And it was this battle though of wanting to take action, but knowing it's not time. It's this settling, this depth. We were preparing to sow our seeds, and now feels like a time that we're going to really understand what those seeds are. Any more you want to share about that?
Yeah, I absolutely think like, we're being invited to, as we go through that shadow and that darkness, we're being invited to let it go. And some people, so if that's what you want to do, like you have the invitation to let that go. And some people won't choose to let that go, and they might stay in that, and that's okay. That's their choice in this life. Maybe they didn't come to have a necessary spiritual life in that sense. So people will do different things with that, but we have this opportunity to let some of that darkness from our past go. And then it makes sense that you're still feeling the Pisces energy while we're in Aries. So then after the spring equinox, the sun went into Aries, but there's still a lot of planets in Pisces. So right now, obviously, Neptune's been in Pisces for 12 years. So Neptune is there, Saturn is there, Venus was there, and Mars. And so there's a lot of energy still in Pisces. So it's like these multiple timelines of we're still kind of processing and moving through those energies. And the day of the spring equinox, I felt this shift in the energy with the sun moving in. I felt like, oh, I'm excited to try new things. I'm excited to take action. And that's actually when I got this idea of, let's do this. So it started to bring passion of like, what am I interested in and how can I move forward and start taking steps? And we're not going to see the big vision, but following our sun's spark, like what is exciting. And so while we've been in Aries, a few things have happened that are important. I'm sure everybody's been hearing about the eclipses. So there were 2 eclipses, which were big deals. We have eclipses twice a year, and they're a 2-week cycle where we have a lunar or a solar eclipse followed. So one's a lunar eclipse and one's a solar eclipse, and it can vary on which one is first. In this case, the lunar eclipse was first, and it was followed by a solar eclipse on April 8th. And the first eclipse was in Libra. And I really feel like that eclipse, Libra is a sign about relating. How do we balance energies and how do we relate to people and all the other things in our lives? And the South Node is in Libra. So the South Node is kind of like the old, like what we've done a lot of. And so the South Node transiting Libra is asking us, what can we let go of? What is not serving us anymore? How do we, like, in relating to others, like, what patterns are we feeling like, oh, that's not healthy, or I'm not enjoying that anymore? So it was focusing on how can we let go of some of those unhealthy patterns. And then we're actually recording this before the second solar eclipse, but that eclipse is in Aries, and Sun is conjunct Chiron during that eclipse. And Chiron is the wounded healer. He was a centaur in astrology that was adopted by Apollo because his parents died. He was an orphan, and he had an injury, and he was immortal. So he lived with this pain, and it never went away, but he learned how to use healing modalities to help himself. And he was basically an herbalist and helped heal others. And so with the Sun being conjunct Chiron, the theme of this is really healing to allow ourselves to embody our authentic selves, because Aries is, again, it's that spark of our life of, like, who are we, being authentic. And as we talked about, we've closed that down for safety and various reasons in the past. And so it's that balance of us as individuals, how do we relate to other people, how can we be our authentic selves and relate to other people in healthy ways. And this is a process. So the Sun will leave Chiron and continue going, but the degree of the eclipse where it happened in Aries is going to be transited by a lot of different planets. Like Mercury will retrograde over it this month, as we're having a Mercury retrograde, and then it will go back direct, and then Mars will go through that space. And so basically this energy, it's not going to be just, oh, we've healed and we're done and we're moving on. It actually goes all the way to like February of 2025, because Chiron will go direct and go back over that eclipse degree at 19 degrees Aries. So in astrology, things play out for longer. You can notice the energy coming up, and okay, we're healing something, and that healing process will take a while. But what's interesting about these eclipses is Venus and Mars. Venus was the ruler of the eclipse in Libra, and Mars is the ruler of the eclipse in Aries, and they were both in Pisces when the eclipse occurred. And so we're going back to that Pisces energy of letting go of our spiritual, like, intuition, what's coming up for us. So that's really interesting, because this really means that our spiritual energy is essentially in charge, and it's helping us shift into what is our life purpose. We're here to embody that now, bring that into existence in, the next decade and things like that. So the fact that Pisces and Neptune, because Neptune rules Pisces, and when those planets are in there, they're bringing that energy to these eclipses that are helping us be more authentic.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think this was one of the first times I've ever actually noticed when the sun shifted. I had the same thing of when it moved to Aries. I woke up and just felt completely different. And it was subtle, but it was enough that I was like, wow. And it felt really good. It felt like I was like the veil had lifted, like a blanket had lifted off. I was like, okay, I can breathe a little easier. And there's this creativity and this spark. And even though I'm not taking action, I felt this momentum charging forward. And same with spirituality. I think the last couple months for me, my gifts are starting to enhance, to shift, to change. And it's been so fun to experiment and see what I'm interested in now. And that'd be like, as we're starting to move into where we are now, I'm seeing this push of curiosity, push of it's time to harness, it's time to, but like in a different way. I think the last decade has been such a marker, at least for me in my life. And yet I've been kind of been that person, and I changed so much as a person. And I feel like I just see this cauldron of a bunch of Olivias that got all mixed together, but like I felt like it was me in the moment. And right now it's like it got dumped out. It's like, who am I now? And that was new. That's what that Aries energy brought to me, was this feeling of I'm a completely different person. I spent the last decade functioning, and I bring it to the decade because that's how it feels. It feels like it's like these larger moments of energy, and I'm curious. I'm like, what? I don't know what all that would have been, but it's like I'm coming out of the haze of that. Like I'm writing a new book, I'm writing a new story. And that's been the most fascinating because I've always felt so sure of myself and understood myself. And it's that dance of looking back and going, oh, wow, that I'm not even that anymore. And who are we becoming? And I definitely feel those pings and those reminders and synchronicities that are showing us we're supported and it's here and will continue to have illumination. And that Aries energy just really drove it forward. So is there anything else in Aries that we want to cover?
There's one more thing I want to talk about, and I just want to comment on the different cycles. So every planet has a different amount of time that it orbits the zodiac. So going from Aries to Pisces. So the sun does that in 1 year, in 365 days. The moon does that in 1 month. And then other planets have different orbits. Like Mars's orbit is 2 years about that it will take to go through, whereas Jupiter is 14-ish years. And then Saturn is that 27 and a half to 29 when you think about your Saturn returns. So yes, I think that what's really interesting with the time we're in now is that a lot of planets are coming to a close. Like when Neptune leaves Pisces, it will be this completely shift because Neptune's been in Pisces since 2012. So maybe it's almost that Neptune, it's reached the last degree of Pisces, but it's going to retrograde and go back a few degrees before it actually enters Aries at the beginning of 2026. But so yes, all of the planets are on these different paths. And I recently just heard this so interesting thing that although the planets cycle and they have patterns, that the planets will never be exactly in the same position that they were until the sun literally burns out. So they'll always be slightly different. Yeah.
That's crazy. And so the energy is always slightly shifting what they're kicking off and bringing forward and illuminating for us. Okay.
But we can see cycles. So the only other thing I want to talk about, because it continues on into this month, is that Mercury in Aries has been really important, and it's about to it retrograded on April 1st. So it went through all of Aries. Mercury is ahead of the sun right now. So Mercury in astrology represents our mind in the sense that it's like what we are thinking about and how we communicate, that mental energy of, what we think about generally as our thoughts and who we are, although we're all those other layers as well. So it was moving ahead, and it was like, okay, what's the plan? What are we doing? What are we moving forward? Then it got to almost the end of Aries, and it was like, okay, this is who I am. And then it was kind of that new who I am, but then it stopped. And it's going back because Aries is ruled by Mars, because Mars is that fire energy. So all the signs have a ruler. And Mars, again, is in Pisces. And Mars is bringing in, when Mars is in Pisces, Mars is typically our action, or kind of like you were saying as ego for the sun. In astrology, typically that's Mars energy. And it's checking in with Mars. It's like going back. And Mars is like, wait. Because Mars recently moved into Pisces, and Mars is like, that's not who we are. We're going to shift. And so Mercury's going backwards in Aries, and along the way, it's going to hit the sun. So that's called the Sun-Mercury Cazimi. And that is a really interesting day. If you can look back, that happened on April 11th. And sometimes the Mercury-Sun cycles are typically these 4 months, because Mercury retrogrades every 4 months. So the sun and Mercury will interact. And so they have these 4-month time periods. And sometimes you get a really like creative inspiration when the sun and Mercury combine, because the sun is like our gifts, and they're having a conversation. They're like, oh, here's this thing I'm passionate about. And Mercury's like, oh, okay, I can take that and do something with that. So look back and try to pay attention. What came up for you around that date? And that might be something you want to move forward with. So we're just thinking about, who am I unique to everyone else? And thus, what should my actions be? How can I use those things that are unique to me, that I'm passionate about, to help the world and bring that forward? The help the world, Mars was in Aquarius as it was moving forward. So that was what Mercury was kind of thinking about. And then now that it retrograded, Mars is now in Pisces and getting new information. And it's more like you're bringing in your larger spiritual purpose And it's very useful to trust like what your intuition is saying, and Mars is communicating, Mars is bringing that into Mercury, and then it will go direct during Taurus, and we'll talk more about that. But we're having this cycle, and a lot of people want to make Mercury retrograde this like scary thing where, oh, we're gonna have miscommunications and technology won't work, or and those things are true and possible, but at the same time it's way more than that, and we can really like work with the energy of how we're reflecting, and right now we're just shifting so much that Mercury is even, it's communicating to us of like, oh, okay, wait, I thought it was this gonna go in this direction, but I'm gonna go back and rethink about that and add in more and shift. And so it's this really useful time for reflection, and it can then give you these new insights of, oh, what do I want to do going forward?
Yeah, I've seen that correlate exactly what you just said directly in my life. And it's been hard though. I want to say a lot of this is uncomfortable a lot of times when you feel or you think like, okay, I think I'm going to go this way. And then it's this realization of, wait, I think there's something else. And you're like, no, I thought this was it, and I'm going to just do it. I have been experiencing that, and it can be jarring and confusing. But I also feel like there's a lot of purpose, and it's also felt very supportive. So trusting what you're noticing, or if something's being redirected a little bit, that's purposeful and it's meaningful. Listen to it and decide from there. Mm-hmm. And so I want to take us into Taurus, because I think we could go so deep on a lot of these topics, but let's bring us to where we are now. The sun has moved into Taurus, and let's talk about those themes.
Yeah, so Taurus in general, Taurus is a fixed earth sign. So fixed signs, they're typically stable. They don't like change. So a lot of people with Taurus suns, they like their routine. They like to eat similar foods day to day. They just don't like a lot of spontaneity, those sorts of things. So when you think of that's the fix, and then the earth is like really the material world, like what is actually, how we are actually experiencing our environment through our senses is a Taurus theme. And then material resources such as food, water, money, anything that we literally get from the earth, and a lot of those things are pretty stable. But Uranus is right now in Taurus, so we have to look at Taurus and what's going on with Taurus this particular year with what planets are in Taurus with the sun. And Uranus has been in Taurus for a long time, and Uranus is all about shaking things up. It's a lightning bolt or an earthquake, or it's just giving you new ideas. It doesn't want to do things the same. It wants to do things differently, and that can be uncomfortable for those fixed Taurus energies. So regardless of if your sun's in there or somebody, you have different planets that could be in there. And so whatever, or what area of life that represents for you, could be really getting shaken up. And Jupiter is also in Taurus this year as well. So that's sort of the general what is Taurus about. And when you think of it as the second sign of the zodiac, it's now like, what are we going to do with all that inspiration we had in Aries, with those curiosities and things we like started, and not all of them went places, and now what ones do we actually want to devote our energy into?
Okay, that feels really right on and makes sense and helps, because when I look at some of the things I channeled, I didn't know the basis of Taurus. I can never remember astrology the way you can. And so I want to share, I'm very visual, so a lot of my messages come visually, and then I have to parse out what is this really sharing. And I think relative to Taurus and that physicality, those elements, the water, the earth, that, money, ourselves, how we relate to all this. When I first went in to get messages for today, I immediately saw like lush green grass. There was dew, but there was sunny, and I just saw myself frolicking, right? Running through the grass, and there was a lightness to myself. And then this storm and this water moved in, and I quickly went into this cave. It was dark, it was wet, but it was like, okay, something's coming, and like it was still beautiful, right? Like nothing shifted. It was just this like energy of pushing me into this cave, which I kind of relate to our internal selves, to that shadow, to that our understanding in this physical life. we can be out there in the spiritual and thinking and being in those planes. And this shift was, no, let's go within our bodies, go within our subconscious, and really have this look at those shadows. Because I was in this cave waiting, and I was wet and I was cold and a bit uncomfortable, but then I knew I would be fine there. There was things that I needed to learn, to feel, and I was just waiting for this rainbow. And that was very clear, that the storm would pass and then this rainbow would come, and that it really showed me like the grass was yearning for that wetness and that rain and that cleansing. And I was too. We're all grabbing different aspects and different pieces of this. And the connection to water, the land, I kept feeling like the earth, the stone, just beckoning to me. And that it feels really relevant right now as the sun is in Taurus and we're moving through these other planetary aspects, that nature is giving us signs. Like, they are speaking to us, warning us, showing us so much, and yet we aren't always listening. So there felt like there was a confusion around what it was trying to tell, and that there was this distinct disconnection of like, I'm standing at the side of this river and I'm looking around, and yet am I really understanding what it's whispering to me? And that was really fascinating, because it felt like from an individual standpoint, we're learning to reclaim that and understand it's like this greater weaving that's happening. And we're so quick to say it's just within me, right? And right, that's all we have control of. But in reality, it's this grand fabric that, back to where I started, that faded feeling of, I just see these sparks of energy hitting each of us. And so like, we're playing purposeful roles, and nature and our guides are right there with us, supporting us and speaking to us. And we are being asked so deeply to listen, to notice, to become more attuned to the cycles of weather, season, animals, ourselves, our bodies, our kids. And just, it's a reminder that we've really easily forgotten our place in this connection to it, because the way our society is set up, how our conveniences, our consumerism, our need for money, for stability. So we have to be doing, and we kind of cover the dirt, we cover the plane, and it's this beckoning to go, hold on, we're all here listening, and are you listening to me? Because it feels like that fire is destructive, like that fire energy is coming to burn. And so we need to be also ready to connect to that water and that earth, to ground us, to cleanse us, to help us navigate these fiery energies that were being placed upon us and within ourselves, to help us really notice, where we're supposed to be going, and what we're really drawn to. That was a lot, but
yeah, that's so interesting. And I've been reading the book Cosmos and Psyche by Richard Tarnas, and the whole separation from Earth, he has this whole chapter on it. It's very interesting. But basically, since the scientific revolution, and when we realized that the sun was actually the center of our solar system and not Earth, that we have become more and more disconnected, and we view ourselves, the modern world views like the self as humans are the only ones that have consciousness, and they've forgotten that connection, that that ancient people believed that the earth had consciousness and the animals have consciousness, and we're seeing and experiencing different things as they're communicating to us. And so he literally drew like a visual of the self, and this is all that's consciousness, and this is the bigger world, and that's void of all of this, and how we can go back to like seeing the whole world with consciousness. Because I truly believe, like the earth has a consciousness all of its own, and that it's communicating with us, whether that's with our spirit guides or other things. But yes, that all of the earth is alive and experiencing consciousness. So that's so
yeah,
so cool.
It feels all connected, and so important to just remember that. So where else should we focus in, Abbie? What else is happening?
Yeah, we'll go through the biggest energies of the Taurus season. So April is not just April. Taurus goes from April 19th to May 20th. And Taurus season is a really active time where a lot of things are going on. So I'm going to touch on like the most important things. And this conjunction that I'm about to talk about is probably one of the most important things that happens all year because it is a rare conjunction. So Jupiter and Uranus are going to come together. So that's when they're in the same spot in the sky. And the planets, how astrologers view it, is the planets are always talking, but it's like that sacred geometry of what aspects are they having. So right now they're together as one. So their energies are like fusing. And how do, when they fuse, like that creates this new energy that's unique or that's more than just Uranus or Jupiter. It's their energies coming together. And so that only happens once every 14 years when Jupiter conjuncts Uranus. But what's really interesting is that they don't always conjoin in Taurus. So the next time they conjoin in Taurus is in 2107, like 2107, so in a long time. But they conjoined in 1941 during World War II, and then in the 1800s as well. So but it can vary. So it's this kind of unique conjunction that's happening in Taurus. They'll come again in 14 years. They'll meet in the sign of Cancer. So when they come together, it's like a seed is being planted. And what's going to be happening when they come together is you're going to have that seed planted and it will develop for this whole next 14-year cycle. So up to now, we were at the end of that cycle. And when you get to the end, it's like you almost don't have the inspiration anymore. It's like that cycle ended and we're feeling a little like, oh, I don't know what direction I'm going to go in. Because Jupiter, Uranus, how you can think of it is that on a global scale, it's going to be showing us like social, political, technological progress. So all these new ideas, because Uranus is like giving us these lightning bolts of ideas, and Jupiter is just like, yeah, let's do it. Let's try this. Let's expand this. Let's move forward. And so it's all this innovation that comes from Jupiter-Uranus conjunctions. And so we're going to see that on a global scale of big changes that happen. But on a personal scale, you can look at your chart and you can say, oh, where is Taurus in my chart? Like, what house is it in? And for me, it's in the 11th house. And the 11th house is like the community. It's like groups. So I'm having these sparks of like, oh, how do I go out into the community? How do I plant the seed? And so that will really change for me in the next 14 years of like, oh, I'm going to have this idea and it will come to fruition. And so you can look at your house placement to get an idea of what area of life this will occur for you personally. But overall, you're going to feel inspired or have like a new understanding of something that really shifts within you. And it's like this lightning bolt moment that will lead to big shifts in your life. And so for you, Olivia, this is interesting. It's actually happening really close to your Mars, and you have a grand cross. So your Mars is squaring two planets. So it's squaring Mercury and your moon Saturn conjunction, and it's opposing Pluto. So whenever anything happens to any of those planets, it reacts to all the other planets, which is why it's called a grand cross. The energy is going all around. So it's activating your Mars, and your Mars is your way of taking action. And the way of taking action, yours is going to shift, and it's going to impact your voice, your Mercury, your how you think and communicate. It will impact your emotions and your sense of security, how you feed and take care and nurture yourself in that essence. And then Pluto is transformation and change, and so it will be interesting to see how that shifts for you. And for me, it's another point called Black Moon Lilith, which is kind of our fears, like what we worry about and wonder about. And it's opposing my Juno, which is an asteroid. So there's just so much, like, you might not have something at that exact point, but it will still bring up these ideas. For me, it's like I'm going to have some sort of maybe like breakthrough in my fears surrounding the balance of myself and me in long-term partnerships. And so I don't know, but then it's also in that house of community. It'll be interesting to see how it manifests for us, because we should pay attention and be like, oh, how did this cycle start and what will that lead to? in 7 years, and
And that starts on the 20th of April, or is this?
Yeah, so the energy really builds up all throughout the month of April. The conjunction is exact around the 20th, and then that energy stays until early May. Well, actually, it's going to stay until Jupiter leaves the sign of Taurus, which will happen May 25th. So the whole month of Taurus, Jupiter will be there, and this energy is going to be really strong and prevalent. And it's a really great time to manifest when Jupiter's in Taurus, because Taurus is the material, Jupiter is abundance, growth. It's like, yes, like if you're passionate about it, do it. You can manifest that. So the underlying energy of the month is this conjunction with Jupiter and Uranus.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And especially around the channeling that I had, I just kept hearing new and this really good feeling energy around it. It felt very grounding, felt very like just fulfilling. And so they shared there's newness, new opportunities, new people, new places, new energy. It's all coming in for us and for this group. And I channeled for this group specifically. So I trust whoever finds this is really feeling a lot of these themes. And then also to help us expand ourselves and to begin to sow those seeds where we're headed. But these new things, these new places, these new peoples are really allowing us to expand, to show us and create new energy for us, because again, everything that we've kind of chatted about is this request to step into this new embodiment of ourselves, this new path. These insights are coming. I'm like, that's a lot what you described around the Grand Cross. I'm like, that is a lot of different ways that this energy is going to hit. And I am curious because the 20th is Stephen and I's 7th anniversary, which is really interesting too. And I wonder if anything will come up with him and I. I mean, it always does, right? As we are coupled, but it feels good. Like this feels like we need to harness this. And I did learn, this is going back to the eclipse too, but it made me think of that right now. They're turning CERN on the 8th for the first time in many years. And so like there's this, it just feels like what's about to happen. Like
what is
CERN,
that?
it's that Hadron Collider.
Oh, okay.
So that they literally rip like portals into the field. Like it's really powerful, and I'm very curious about what a lot of things that I'm hearing about, just like people are really pulling on this energy, and I think there's a lot here that we can play with for good or bad, right?
Yeah, and I just want to say one more thing about Jupiter Uranus is that, when you go back and you look at the last few times it conjoined, it was like during the beginning of the Industrial Revolution and during World War One, where we were just like creating so much. And so yes, it's this time to create real things, and so it'll be so exciting to see what everybody is inspired to do with this energy. Okay, so, and then right after this, the sun moves into Taurus. On the 23rd, we have our full moon. So every month there's a full moon and a new moon, and we're having a full moon first in this sign. So the moon is going to be in Scorpio. So Scorpio is across from Taurus in the zodiac. So a full moon is always in the sign opposite of where the sun is, because the sun is shining across the earth to where the moon is on the opposite side. And so this moon, as I was feeling into it and looking at the aspects, it's squaring Pluto and Pluto's transformation. Scorpio is a water sign. It's a lot to do with our feelings and our emotional body and our intuition. And I really feel like with everything that's been happening with the eclipses and how we're shifting to this new version of ourselves, this moon is giving us this like opportunity to transform how we deal with our feelings. So to take more ownership of how we feel ourselves. And like for me, like I'm really trying to focus on feeling positive feelings in the morning, like focusing on those and sitting with them and having those stay with me throughout the day, and just like letting go of things that aren't serving me. Not that we don't have grief or sadness or emotions come up, but how do we not then just sit in that and instead recognize it, validate it, notice it, but then push ourselves to then, but I want to be in these more positive feelings. So not only with ourselves, like how we own our own feelings, but then how we deal with feelings of others. And how we interact with others. It's important to set clear boundaries with other people's feelings and not let their feelings impact our feelings, or to not let how others might feel about like decisions you're making or things like that change how you make choices. So we're really being invited to shift how we deal with our feelings.
That makes sense. And what's coming up, I think, around this is also really taking note around what you're being drawn to right now. Kind of in a sense, it feels like the ways that we soothe ourselves, the things that we do to kind of maybe escape a little, but come back to center. So, like, what are you reading? What are you watching? What are you consuming or listening to at this time? And know that there's a reason for it, much more so than any other time right now. This energy and what we're focusing on, it's all aligned. It's all like, I just see this big weaving tapestry of it's more purposeful than usual. And so what is that teaching you? What is those through lines that you're like, because it's stirring something deep within us to help us understand ourselves, our feelings, our place right now. And so what's piquing your interests? What are you searching for? And where's your curiosity? And I'll start with just, I've been reading the ACOTAR series as a recommendation from a friend or two. And oh my gosh, one, I didn't realize that this was a thing, that so many people are reading this right now. But holy moly, I relate so much to the characters and just even the author too, of it's bringing up a lot of things inside of me that I'm moving through, and it's like it just reawakened something deep within me, this like power and this knowing. And I'm not going to give much more around just like what I'm moving through and what I'm deciding, but it's so a part of my life path and my curiosity. So that has been super interesting because I typically read self-help books, self-development, or I watch something and it just kind of plopped in. And then getting this message too, it's like, whoa, there are some big nuggets there to look at. So trust that. And Abbie, what is coming up for you? What are you focusing on right now?
Yeah, well, when you brought up reading, I love to read, and the book that I've just been finishing is a book by Gretchen Rubin, which is called Life in Five Senses. And so it's talking about, literally our sense of sight, smell, taste, hearing, touch. And for me, that's been such an important message because obviously it helps with being more present and really this embodiment of me coming back to my body, because I can be so in my head and thinking about all these interesting things, and also bringing that more joy in the day-to-day life, of noticing, what can I see or smell or taste that I'm enjoying on this day, when sometimes it feels like, okay, this change is slow and I want all these shifts to happen, but we're here and now, and like just that embodiment. So I love that, and I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yes, it's really interesting. And okay, where's the next planet or things we should be looking at? I feel like that's all connected to maybe the full moon, and all these broader energies are really seeming to intermingle in a lot of ways.
They absolutely do. Mercury just is going to stop retrograding at the beginning of Taurus and then station direct. So it goes back over all of the points. It's going to hit the point of the April 8th eclipse, re-bring that up. And so again, that's just a portion of the continued healing that we're doing, and it will continue through Aries and then transition into Taurus on May 15th. So Mercury will change signs, and as it does, it's going to interact with Pluto. As soon as all the planets go into Taurus, they have a square with Pluto. So it's the first time this is happening since Pluto's been in Aquarius. So it's just interesting to kind of note that will happen around May 17th. But Pluto again is like helping Mercury transform. How do we communicate? How do we think? And it's from all of the reflection Mercury's done, it's this opportunity to then transform again. And as Mercury leaves Aries and moves to Taurus, Venus and Mars also ingress this month, so that means they change signs. Venus is moving into Taurus on April 29th at the beginning of the month, and that's one of Venus's home signs. It feels at home there. Venus loves to get in touch with her senses and explore and pleasure and just play and enjoy that, and it's gonna help us just be our true self with that. And then Mars will enter Aries on April 30th. Venus is feeling into what she values and how that relates to our new self. So our values are going to shift a bit, and like, what do we enjoy and how now with our new values will that kind of shift in our life. She still wants to find pleasure in her day-to-day, but in a healthy way. And Mars, as it moves into Aries, it's ready to take action, and it's following in Mercury, like the path Mercury just went through, following Mercury's path. And so that's very supportive of each other. So first, how do we take action on a self level, like what we do for ourselves, and then with others in our day-to-day, and then finally as it moves through with our future.
That feels really nice. That feels like a supportive energy. And back to kind of what we've talked about, right? This asking of us to kind of step up. How do we really want to be? And how do we set healthy boundaries? And how do we also listen more clearly to this bigger tapestry of our life? I think it's easy to get bogged down in this day to day. And so how do we find pleasure, sensuality, passion, enjoyment? Not that it has to be over the top and grand. When you hear those words, at least for me, it elicits a very specific feeling. But like, this is simple. And we're being asked to really awaken to our new path. So not necessarily tied to like ascension, I immediately go again, new earth things, but more that we've walked through this threshold and we're beginning to follow this thread that we're being pulled towards, and we need to take care of ourselves. We need to really firm up those pieces so we can take that cage off our heart, right where we started, so we can find that vitality, trust that timing, and open our hearts, be welcoming to the newness and the things that are coming. And then this really heavy theme of forgiveness. So forgiveness of what we have and haven't done, what we've said, what we've been, what we haven't said and been. It's time to forgive ourselves. It feels like this collective request of this big grief release, this big I'm done, like this kind of from this fuel of this spark within, just the shedding of this, like the tortoise shell of hardness wherever that is in our lives. And so remembering that this is really unique to each of us as individuals and the roles we're playing, but can we welcome this energy in a little bit in preparation for this future that we're being gently and yet sometimes radically pushed towards, and the purpose is there. We don't understand it yet, but all around this, the energy I really feel is like a blanket has been put upon us to help us feel grounded and soothed and present, but we're about to get pushed off that cliff. Like, we've got you, and like, we're going to be lifted and like parachute down, but it's absolutely terrifying. And so it's this balancing of these two almost extremes, and knowing it's so purposeful and worthy.
Yeah, and I love that because like the sun is our guide in that, and how that relates is like, you know, following your inner light and your spark and your passion, and the sun is guiding us. And what you were saying about forgiveness, that leads right into, so Pluto moved into Aquarius, and that was a huge deal. It is going back to Capricorn later this year, but so on May 2nd it will stop, it will retrograde, and it won't move forward. So it got to barely into 2 degrees. So basically it's going to retrograde and be at 1 degree of Aquarius again. And that is about self-love and like changing how we love ourselves, like really loving ourselves unconditionally. And that could relate to like the forgiveness, forgiving ourselves, but also just really like we have to fully love ourselves. So I think that's so interesting, and Pluto is such an important player in these shifts that are happening too. So just know that, kind of thinking about this new way of loving ourselves. And then as we move forward in the month, we're going to have a new moon in Taurus. So that happens on May 7th, close to the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. It is sextiling Saturn and Neptune, and those are positive energies. So a sextile is like, it's a 60 degrees, and it's like it's supportive in the sense that like we're giving you a way to like, it's like a key, like how do you open the door? So Saturn is discipline and Neptune is this spiritual energy, this intuition. So it's supporting. I really feel like this new moon, and Mercury is conjunct Chiron where it was at the eclipse, and I feel like for the final time direct, I just feel like the planets are all coming together, and it's just helping us plant those seeds for the future. It's kind of that same energy, but just this like planting. And the new moon it's like a new beginning. And you know, people think of a moon cycle as this month-long thing, but as we're seeing, like this Jupiter Uranus cycle is 14 years. And so this planting of the seed, I think, really happens with this new moon, and how we can take action based off a commitment to our heart is kind of what I'm seeing for that new moon.
I love that. That makes sense. And so to wrap this up, let's bring it back to Sun in Taurus. What would that overarching theme takeaway be? And maybe even an affirmation or just reminder for us to kind of cling to in a way, as to remind ourselves as we move through this. It's purposeful and powerful. What would you say?
Well, the month closed out, like after that new moon, it's quiet for a few days. There's not as much going on, and we really can integrate. And then as the sun gets to the end of Taurus, before it moves into Gemini, it's going to have those conjunctions with Uranus and Jupiter. So that's happening from May 13th to May 18th. And this can be a really positive conjunction. Like it can give you this belief in yourself, or this confidence, and that you can like create abundance. You can create these things you're excited about. The only like downside is, oh, maybe overindulgence, something like that. So just, you know, look for that. But really it's going to just get you excited and feel like, okay, I can do this. Like I'm excited about this. And you know, we've been waiting for this. And so just feeling those positive energies. And then the sun will move and go into Gemini, and it's sort of like, I want to just mention that Venus will then do the same thing the sun did. Venus is a little behind the sun, and it will have those same interactions with Uranus and Jupiter a little bit later. And so it's that continued, as the sun moves into Gemini, there are still planets in Taurus and Aries. So it's like this gradual shift, but following the sun continues to move us forward and just highlight a new sense. So the sun went through that. It's bringing all light to this area, and as we move forward and it moves forward into a new sign, that is still like within us and growing, but that the sun will continue to push forward, and that we can do that. You know, my theme that I wrote down for this month was called breakthroughs and seeding the future. But I think when I think of the sun, is like the sun just continue, it's so resilient, right? It just continues on, and we can use that as a metaphor for our life.
I think you're exactly spot on. That was a really helpful summary. And the affirmation that came to me, kind of looking at your theme and everything, was, I welcome my seeds of potential. I think that just summarizes this energy that we're being pushed into and brought upon ourselves as we've asked for this for so long. And then the animal that came through really strongly with this energy was a fox. So mysterious, smart, witty, and joyful, right? And sweet and community. I also think of fox as kind of being sly and smart, and also kind of keeping those secrets to themselves. You could say maybe possibly wearing a mask, but in the sense that this is the time to allow that, so all of these seeds that we are welcoming, that are here for our potential, can really anchor without other people's input. I think a lot of what we covered was, you know, really checking in on your boundaries and being willing to kind of push against what other people might have those expectations of you, to come back to yourself. And so it feels like it is a purposeful time to ignite that spark, but kind of maintain it. Like, keep it to yourself. You don't have to go share with the world, and as much as you might want to, and do it mindfully where it feels good, but also protect these seeds, because like I said, they're being planted. They're not germinated. Their roots haven't grown. And so we need some time. But have fun, play, and spend time with your friends. It feels really important. And listen to that guidance, listen to your highest self, listen to the wisdom of nature, the wisdom of this broader connection that runs so deep and goes through so many spheres.
Yeah, I think the time when we start talking about this more, like you're saying, Taurus isn't the time, because as the sun moves into Gemini and the other planets start moving into Gemini, that is the more appropriate time to share, because Gemini is an air sign. It's about communication, it's about networking with people, of how do I now take these seeds that are growing and continue to support them. So I definitely feel like, yes, like you don't want to be swayed by like what you're feeling. Trust your inner knowing of what are your seeds, and there will be a time to share that. But
Yeah, it's purposeful. There's purpose and it's important. We're firming ourselves. We're firming this so we are ready when we are pushed off that cliff and we know where we're headed and we're ready to leap. Kind of, if you listen to one of my previous episodes where I looked into the oracle cards, it's this preparation for a leap of faith. It's what we're being asked to do, and so we're really reigniting and having to cultivate that strength and that heart-centeredness, and the sun is here ready to support. And so I'm really excited to continue to have these conversations as we go through each month and we see where that sun is and see what intuitively the energy and our guides really want to share to just support and bring insight, take it or leave it. So I will always say that, take it or leave it. It's up to you what we share here, but we're really, I think both of us are tapped in a very unique lens. And so it's fun to come together and see how that really comes. Like there is so much connection and similarity through what we're both seeing, but we're looking at two different things and we're also living two completely different lives, and all of you listeners are too. And I think that's what's so cool is the synchronicities and the connections never cease to amaze me. So I think we leave you with remembering I welcome my seeds of potential, and go live your best life. Allow that awakening, allow that heart centeredness that you surely have to really lead you through this path, lead you through this time, and ground and be present and firm up yourself. And you've got this, right? We are all doing hard things, and yet we always survive them. So I wish you all the best, and I hope this was really insightful and supportive.
yeah, thank you so much for having me, Olivia. This is so fun. I always enjoy our conversations, and it's fun to be able to share our reflections. Like for me, I really feel like it's about continuing to reflect and just be intentional and see how things show up. So it's so fun to share that with you.
Oh, I love it. I love it too. So thank you for your time, and we'll be back with another episode in 2 weeks.